Hello and welcome. Thank you for downloading today's episode. My name is JJ Flazanes and I am your host. I really do appreciate you taking the time to download and listen to this episode. Today's show, The Healing Feeling Shit Show, is an interview with my friend Rachel Kaplan, whose podcast is called The Healing Feeling Shit Show. We have a really fun time today. She and I have similar missions, and I look forward to hearing your feedback. Before we get into today's show, I thought because of the theme being healing feeling, that I would announce here that we are doing Releasing What Weighs You Down 2020. It is now being hosted this year, upcoming year, at 1440 Multiversity. You can look them up. It's 1440multiversity.org, I believe, but it's 1440 Multiversity. It is in Santa Cruz, California, about 15 or 20 minutes from the San Jose airport. And how the tickets work differently is you buy everything through them. There's a ticket price that includes materials and extra goodies. And then you pick the kind of residence you want to have. And I don't know what all the options are. I have not been there yet. And I don't have the link ready. But I just wanted to let you know that the dates are January 10th through the 12th, 2020. That's a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We will start Friday night after dinner. You are to arrive on the property on Friday, and all the meals are included. So all meals are included. Everything's included after you pay for both the room that you would like to stay in if you want to share a room, and then also the ticket price. So 1440 Multiversity, January 10th through the 12th, Releasing What Weighs You Down. It's going to be a little different because we're in a new space with a new company, but it will be mostly me and Lisa Thomas. And we'll be presenting some same information, but some of it will be new and different and more streamlined because we actually have a little bit less time. The workshop starts after dinner at around 7 o'clock and ends on Sunday, I believe at 2 o'clock, or maybe even sooner than that. So maybe even like noon. So it's a little bit shorter than I'm used to, but we're going to get it done. And I've added the extra exercise and meditation sessions in the morning. So I hope that if you have some things to release that weigh you down, whether you've been to Releasing What Weighs You Down or any of my live events before, as you know, it's like a detox for your emotions and a reset that I really feel very strongly about having in January, because that's the time where we want to recalibrate to a new year and really release some of the patterns and behaviors and habits that we have that keep us stuck if you're stuck in any area of your life. Or it's just a really great way to start the year off, making a commitment to yourself by taking care of yourself in a new and meaningful way. So on to today's show, Rachel Kaplan. She has been relentlessly studying healing since her life was devastated by the traumatic suicide of her first love at 14 years old. This lifelong personal pursuit led her on an international mission to study the methodologies of the world, focusing on spiritual practice of Eastern religions and the cutting-edge Western psychological approaches. She's a longtime yoga practitioner and teacher, as well as a bold, seasoned psychotherapist. After 25 years of studying these technologies and successfully working with students and clients, Rachel simplified the single most important and necessary tenet of deep core psychological healing as the emotional equivalent to potty training. Rachel has created a new podcast, The Healing Feeling Shit Show, to potty train grown-ups through their foundational first season so they can achieve emotional resilience, the new happy. Rachel also has a thriving psychotherapy practice in the San Francisco Bay Area. Besides catalyzing healing, she delights in music, dancing, design, fashion, and the band Radiohead. Welcome to the show, Rachel.
Thanks so much for having me, JJ.
Your pitch at New Media Summit was definitely one of my favorites when you talked about poop. And not because I'm like a poop person. You know, some people think poop's really funny, like poops and farts, and everyone goes, ha ha ha, and they giggle and they think, you know, it's like hilarious. It was because of the correlation to poop and emotions.
Right.
That was awesome for me because it's the very basic, like everybody poops and everyone has emotions and you have to get them out. And so because of that, you started the Healing Feeling Shit Show. And I want to go back and hear your story of what it is you needed to heal, how much poop you needed to get out of you in order for you to start your journey. And then, of course, lead you to starting your show.
Absolutely. Well, I have a very obvious starting point for my journey, which is that my first love, and it was an obsessive love, a teenage love, it started at age 12, but he, right before both of us turned 15, committed suicide. And the story there is even more tragic than it sounds. I mean, I think every suicide for anyone involved is devastating. But of course, I was at a very vulnerable age, and he manipulated me to be involved, but to be stuck, to be unable to stop him. So that really was a death of some sort for me. I think I was, always pretty intellectual, somewhat emotional, or pretty emotional at that age too, but I just shut my entire emotional system down and moved into the recesses of my mind, but was miserable and, planned to die for a few years. I actually tried to stop him by telling him that I would commit suicide, which I didn't really mean, but it was just the best strategy I could figure out as a 14-year-old. So basically by around, I'd say, almost 16, the first time I had feelings for another person, I recognized how damaged I was. I recognized that I had come to believe that, we're all meant to be alone, and that the connection is always short-lived. And I was just so shut down. And since I was trying to have feelings again for someone else, I got really motivated to start therapy. And that was around 16. It led me on this wild ride of, I'd say, therapy. By 17 or 18, I was interested in studying Eastern religions. I lived in India and Nepal while I was in college. I majored in Eastern religions, started practicing yoga as a 19-year-old. So pretty much from that point forward, I've been on a worldwide pursuit of the most effective healing modalities, mainly because of the impact and devastation from that experience. Of course, eventually I started to uncover wounding that came much earlier in my life, as so much of everyone's wounding comes really initially in the first few years. But basically the shit show is the most effective and necessary skills that I think are absolutely imperative for every single human to have if they want to have emotional well-being. And what I really focus on, instead of just calling it happiness, because I think we have a culture obsessed with happiness, I call it emotional resilience, which I think includes tons of happiness and contentment, but is really based in a sense of whatever life throws at you, you can handle because you know how to move your feelings through your body. And the metaphor, last thing I'll say about this whole journey, is that the metaphor of emotions like poop is the most effective way I can convey to my clients. So I'm a psychotherapist. I've been in practice for 13 years. I started that journey 10 years after the suicide of my boyfriend, as far as schooling. But that is the single most effective way I can help people understand how to relate to their emotions, because when we get the sensation that we need to poop, most of us have been trained, almost everybody has been trained that there's nothing you can do, like eating and buying and shopping and swiping and validation. None of it will make the feeling that you need to poop go away. Only the act of pooping goes away, makes that feeling go away. And similarly, only learning to let the feelings move through the body will actually reduce that backlog of emotional pain. So that's the Healing Feeling Shit Show.
When you started using that analogy, did you find people who were less resistant to feeling their feelings?
Yeah, it just kind of lights something up for people, because, and there's an interesting correlation with shame, because, we don't advertise our poops, right? If I had a stinky poop, I wouldn't invite you in to be a part of it. But so there's some degree of privacy and shame. And I think that there is a similar sense of hiding our emotional pain. And so that's a really useful thing for me to connect, because we don't need to feel ashamed about pooping. Like you said, everyone poops. And similarly, we don't need to feel ashamed about emotional pain, because you cannot be a human in this life and not have emotional pain. We know that we and everyone we know will die, that there are losses that you can't avoid if you're really living. Even if you're not, even if you're holed up in trying to stay in your safety zone, you can't avoid pain. And so I think that when people get that analogy, they start to free themselves up. Some people are squeamish about it. I won't lie, but generally I think it just helps it land in the body of, I already know how to deal with this. People know how to deal with their poop. And I'm teaching them, yeah, it's not that different. You get yourself to the place, set yourself up to do it in the clean, good way. You wash your hands, no big deal. Go about your day. You feel lighter and brighter and less full of shit.
Yeah, no, that's what I loved about your ideas and your show and your pitch and your position, because it is very obvious. However, of course, later I thought, well, not everyone has the comfort level of pooping, and not everyone poops very well either.
Right.
So, right. So because our bodies hold tension and we eat foods that disrupt our digestion and cause inflammation. And so people are
Right.
constipated, which is also a sign of emotional stress and anxiety and
Right.
holding on to and that kind of stuff. So I really did appreciate that correlation, and thinking about some of the older generation, like my mother, for instance, who isn't regular and hasn't been regular for a long time until recently, where she has been finally heeding the words of her daughter and going to acupuncture on a regular basis, and is
Awesome.
now eating 8 prunes a day. And she wanted to report to me that she is now finally in her life, that she's finally come somewhat regular. And she did make a mention that she knew that there was part of her head involved, which I thought
Mm,
was finally an interesting awakening, if you
right.
will, that she had about recognizing or admitting that she understood some of the reasons why she didn't go to the bathroom. Like, she wouldn't take a poop in a public place.
Right. Yeah.
So of course, someone like that isn't going
Right.
to necessarily also feel the right to have feelings
Right.
in situations. I mean, my mom, I'm not bashing my mother. My mother's amazing, and I appreciate so much about her, and we have a good relationship. She doesn't listen to the show, and even if she did, I'd still talk about her, because I would like, I bought my parents an iPad to listen to the show, to learn the education, and to watch the videos, the cooking, the exercise. Do they? No. So I give up. But
Yeah.
when I did give up is when she started to be more somewhat interested in actually taking slight
Awesome.
responsibility for some of these things.
That's good.
So in the case of someone like my mom, who has shame for
Sure.
sure,
Mhm.
and wouldn't let herself poop in a public place or in someone else's bathroom, which then causes a disruption in her own physical body, which is also an obvious reflection of this disruption in her emotional life.
Right.
What would be a tactic that you might share with them? I mean, obviously the story of how to poop and that we poop naturally, but then in her case, she does it.
Right. Well, the truth is she is not alone. In fact, I'd say almost everyone at this point, whether, they've been pushing their feelings down for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 70 years. I mean, the truth is that we are conditioned initially by our well-intentioned parents, by telling us that we're okay and that, shh, you're fine, but just the truth that it's hard to take care of a tantruming, crying, emotionally reactive child. And I feel for parents. I don't shame them. Everyone did their best, or most people are doing their best. And people who aren't doing their best are just so flooded and bogged down by their own wounding that they can't do better. So most people from, their first few months alive have been conditioned out of having big feelings, and then our culture absolutely is funded and benefiting from us trying to consume rather than feel. So almost any single adult that I come in contact with, whether through my private practice or the show, I am assuming pretty factually has trouble actually moving their feelings. And that's why this isn't just enough. I mean, if it was as simple as have your feelings like you poop, we could put it all in a bumper sticker. It could be like a 1-hour workshop. The first season of the shit show is probably about 16 to 18 hours of a step-by-step guide. It's really a transformational course in hiding that teaches people, why are you wounded? Why did you shove your feelings down? How did that make perfect sense? And then how do you step-by-step learn how to feel your feelings? And so your mom's not alone. And, one of the best metaphors I give, I think, to understand the problem is that when we have been pushing our feelings down, trying to not show that we're ashamed or that we're afraid, or that we're sad, or that we're sure that we're an imposter, that if people knew us well enough, they'd see that we're full of shit. one of the best ways to understand that is when you've done that for long enough, it gets just like you'd have a really big pile of shit you're trying to move through. You have this huge file. It's like, it's like a massive video, right? And so I tell people, if you can picture that you forgot to download your movie on your iPad before you went to the airport, when you get to the airport, even if you have an hour, you're not going to get that movie on your iPad because the bandwidth at the airport sucks. And so a lot of the work that I'm teaching people how to do is, how do you increase your bandwidth? How do you increase your sense of support? And there are lots of ways to do it. I can give you a couple in a moment if you want, so that you can move these big files that have become massively terrifying. And that's what I'm doing as a therapist. I joke that I'm like a hotspot for bandwidth, is I'm templating to my clients how to move those big feelings. And then there are ways like using nature, like someone sitting with a tree, the same tree every day, and you go and you kind of tune in and slow down, and you feel your body, breathe into your torso, and start to maybe even talk to the tree about what's bothering you. Like that sense of being held by something bigger can be something that increases bandwidth. Using music, using art, there's all kinds of strategies. And I break it down generically for all emotions. And then episodes 7 through 10 will break down each specific emotion. And for my show, that's anger, sadness, fear, and shame, with tons of strategies about how you can connect into that particular feeling and move that particular feeling.
What's been the response, I'm curious, for people listening to the show?
Well, thanks for asking. I mean, it's funny for me. I met you in a podcasting world. I knew nothing about podcasts, barely listened to them before I made this. And so it's all been a kind of an adventure, and one which I haven't necessarily had the data to interpret. I mean, one response has been that, I think it's been, actually today is a Wednesday, so it's an anniversary day. I think I met maybe 14 weeks since I launched. And the stats are around 43,000 downloads for the 12 episodes. I'm getting emails from people all over the country, people saying this has been life-changing. A born-again Christian who hasn't had any emotions for this long, or people recognizing themselves through some of the way I'm describing some of the different circumstances that people of different race have in our culture, in our country. A lot of people just, saying that it's really speaking to these parts of themselves, that they're crying throughout the episodes. I mean, it feels like people are really moved. It's hard to know. I got one last week that said, I love this. I think this is from Jimmy. Jimmy says, I love this. I think it could really help so many people, but I'm a little put off by the poop stories. I tried to get through the first 2, but number 3, it's just gross. And I'm wondering, would it help more people without the poop? And I just love that I'm like, I just know who I am and why I'm using the poop stories. And I am one of those people that thinks poop stories. I just always get a good laugh out of poop stories. And, I explained to him what purpose the poop stories were serving, but then said, we might just have really different tastes, because I think the poop story number 3 is the best one.
Well, and everybody, I did a whole show called Dear Haters. There's
heard it. I loved it.
There's a fast forward button, guys, right? So if you don't, the poop story is coming, why would you throw the baby out with the bathwater?
Exactly.
If you get benefit in the whole show and there's a small part of it you don't like, just skip over it.
Right. And for me, part of what I'm trying to model, and I think I really genuinely live this, is what is the point? And for all of your listeners who are obviously so committed to their well-being and their health and their spiritual evolution, it's like, we are going to die. We don't know when, but it's definite. I mean, unless you're one of those people who is, banking on uploading your consciousness into whatever comes next, which, that's so questionable to me. But part of the joy of life is that it's temporary. And so for me, if we're going to spend 20 years, 30 years, however long it's been cultivating well-being, what is the point if we don't enjoy and lighten up and figure out how we actually have fun? And so, that's one of the things I like to hold, is that the content of the shit show, the first season at least, is really some of the deepest, most painful, most excruciating, least tolerable experiences we all have, like burning in shame and worthlessness, feeling terror, like really coming into a direct experience of these parts that we were sure at some point made us unlovable. That's heavy shit, right? But I am doing it, and I'm presenting it, and I'm talking about it in a way where I'm really embodying that, look, this doesn't have to be so heavy. It can be light also. And I do think that when you get to the place where you're no longer preferring, where you're no longer avoiding your painful emotions like the plague, which never works, right? It's like you can't actually, you said this actually in my show, like we can't run away from ourselves. Like wherever we go, no matter how medicated we are, you know, they're going to catch up with us, whether it's in the schism between who people think we are versus how we feel, or just the, you know, terrible addiction and, you know, destruction of the things that we hold, you know, valuable, like our relationships. You can't outrun your pain. And therefore I'm just of the mind of, once you start feeling it as it is, which I would say the best way to describe emotions are intense sensations rolling in squads. Once you get to that place, it's not really that much less pleasurable than pleasure. It's like, it's a really intense experience you have for some very temporary amount of time. And then it's over and you feel lighter and you feel better. And so I think it's possible to cultivate a real ease and joy with learning to have pain that really transforms our lives.
Well, when you look at it as the pain can transform your lives, I think for a lot of people, they don't buy into, not my listeners, but let's say other people in my life who have so much trauma and pain.
Yes.
That looking back, they can't possibly see how feeling that again or being anywhere near it, anywhere close to it, has a benefit.
Yeah.
What do you tell the people who, you know, I like to say that I do the work and I talk about this work and I want people to also release themselves of the things that weigh them down. That's my signature event that we do every beginning of the year, January. It might be in February this coming year. And it's for that fact that we all carry around stuff that we don't need to. We're burdened with stuff and that it doesn't serve you. But even though it's like climbing the mountain, it may be really hard to climb the mountain. But when you get to the top, it's like, oh, like I've made it.
Right.
And then it's cake on the way down.
Right.
What do you tell people who are super afraid to go into those really dark places?
Well, I mean, it's slightly different if I'm sitting one-on-one with someone, whether in person or through Zoom. But the main thing is, you know, helping people. I have a way, I think, of seeing people's patterns and the ways they're suffering despite their efforts to avoid their pain that really almost can be alarming to people. Like, how do you know? You know, there's a sense of just being able to call out very quickly, usually just because I've been doing this for so long, how their efforts to not have pain actually leave them in pain. And so there's something about people just feeling witnessed in their best strategy and how it's not really working that I think opens up the first gate. And so the first episode of the Shit Show talks a lot about the cultural conditioning and how we got here and all of our efforts and our strategies and how they're not working. And I'm trying to help people relate. Like, yeah, I try that, I do that. And then the other thing is that I think, you know, and it's again different in my therapeutic work versus the Shit Show, but creating that connection with the person's pain that expedites their access to it. Like that person probably doesn't have access to their pain, but if I can create an experience with them through my, you know, through my empathy, through my attunement and tracking and just, you know, skillful knowing of where it is in their body, if I can help them feel it a little bit and then help them pay a lot of attention to how there's relief after. And that's not always immediate. A lot of people, it will happen in the first session. A lot of people said that, you know, the first episode, they had them in tears. I have 6 hours of my own clients' interviews. 6 different clients wanted to be involved. And so we had pretty thorough interviews about their work, and their experiences are woven throughout the first season. And so you're hearing it from me, and then you're hearing it from people who had very different life experience. And I think all those voices help people create that increased bandwidth where they can start to be like, wow, this is me too. And, you know, when someone has their first taste of pain not killing them, you know, and that's a really important thing for anyone listening. Like next time you can't avoid, or maybe you're getting brave listening to us talk and you want to actually turn toward your pain versus turn away from it, pay very close attention when you're feeling it, especially if it starts moving and maybe you cry or you start feeling shaky or you feel rage burning or shame burning. Pay attention to just tracking, like, is it killing you? Is it in fact lethal? And then afterward, you know, once you recover your baseline, and I give all kinds of tips about how to do that well in episode 5. Once you recover your baseline, you want to look at, okay, do you actually feel better? Do you feel lighter? Do you feel more relaxed? It's impossible to not have anxiety. We live in an anxiety-based culture, right? Everyone's stressed, everyone's anxious. Now, I would call that, those two are different words, more societally validated words for fear. So if you're walking around trying to avoid your pain, you cannot have peace inside. It's impossible, because it means you can't be in your body, and there's no other place to have peace. Our minds aren't peaceful. They're labyrinths. They're endless mazes of possibility. So, when you learn how to feel your fear or your sadness or your shame, whatever it is, you will start to have peace. You'll start to be able to settle down and live in your cell tissue, in your body, which I know you're all about in your show. And you'll start to feel better. You'll just start to feel better. And that's proof enough.
Good. All right. I want to talk about happiness. You mentioned it earlier in the show about sort of you have an issue with the word, or people use it too much or throw it around, or maybe give it a meaning that you think isn't appropriate or healthy. Let's talk about your relationship to the word happiness.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it's interesting because I didn't actually include it as one of the episodes. I mean, what I would say for a healthy individual, and, someone who's done a lot of work, or someone, let's say if we imagine the ideal person coming into the world and not having any wounding, right, which we know is impossible, that they have four emotions. If we were to break it down to the most primary, essential emotions, they would have four emotions that they could not get away from throughout their lives. And those would be happy, mad, sad, scared. So those are, you can't, scared is it's biologically useful. It helps us not die. It's like mad is just one of, as much as it has a bad rap. Happy is one of them. Fear. It's all, so those are essential, right? Now in my show, I deal with mad, sad, scared, and ashamed. So the reason I do that is that it's not because I think people are good at feeling happiness. In fact, Brene Brown has been saying a lot recently that the most vulnerable experience is actually joy or happiness, because we're so sure it's going to be pulled out from under us. So I think actually maybe in an upcoming episode, I should talk about happiness, because I don't think we're necessarily actually comfortable with it. I know in my own journey that because I woke up to a sense of spirituality and meaning through such devastation, it took me much longer to be comfortable with happiness than it took to be comfortable with pain, believe it or not, like genuine happiness, not giddiness, not bliss. But what I would say, the reason I critiqued happiness, or the reason why I'm not just trying to usher people on the fast track to happiness, is that one is, I think that a more sustainable experience and a more valuable experience is something called what I would refer to as contentment, or well-being. And I think that can have a real sense of like a gentle, soft optimism, or a sense of delight, or a sense of joy. But I think that, it's a more stable experience. I think when people think about happiness in our culture, because of it's so out of whack, our culture itself, it's so immediate gratification based. It's so consumerist. Most people know how to take more than they know how to give. Like there's all these things in our culture that I think create imbalance in people. Because of that, I think that when people are looking for happiness, they want like bliss. They want a high. And part of what I teach my clients, and I don't talk about it quite as much in the shit show, is that we can get into a really low state of despair and pain. We can also get into, real manic states of highs, and neither of them are actually, sustainable. To stay at that high of happiness without genuine well-being, you need to be really medicated, whether it's on other people's praise and validation, or drugs, or, incessant busyness, or concerts, whatever your drug of choice is. And so, what I think is better than that sense of riding the high and, is learning how to have balance, how to recover your baseline when something hard happens. And that to cultivate that, you have to get so strong that you end up naturally cultivating well-being and joy and happiness. It's just a little less manic.
I like that. And I'd agree. I recently heard someone say, well, I don't think I'm happy. And I've heard that through my years. Well, I'm not happy. Oh, especially in relationship. A husband and a wife, they were friends of my ex-to-be and the wife said, I'm not happy. And I said, well, it's not his job to make you happy. So,
Right. Yeah.
and seeing her mother, who had had 4 marriages and was highly medicated on pain pills and alcohol, and had been hospitalized for anxiety attacks. And anyway, she's a mess. I'm like,
Right.
well, of course you don't know how to be happy, but it isn't his job to figure it out for you.
Right.
So I do believe, like what you just said, that there's this idea, this misnomer. It's weird. Like, I'm trying to correlate it to exercise or to weight loss, only because sometimes it's easy for people to understand,
Uh-huh.
like, oh, I'm not seeing any results. For what are you doing?
Right. Yeah.
Well, I'm not doing anything. Okay. Well, I've changed my diet. Are you exercising? No. Or there's this idea of, oh, because again, they don't understand the science behind exercise. Like, women will, well, I'm not really losing any weight. Well, are you doing resistance training? No, I'm on the treadmill. Okay. Well, if you lift weights to go to failure, oh no, I'm doing like the 2-pound weights. I'm like, okay, that's not okay. You don't understand how the science.
Right.
And it's, again, our misunderstandings and oversimplification of things that get us into trouble, when I believe, especially with emotions, people oversimplify, happy, or that their emotions are important for them to express. Again, another reason why I really loved your pitch and your show and your mission, because it is something we need, which is what I'm trying to do also, is to get people to understand and be in touch with
Right.
their emotions and to recalibrate. I still like the word happy.
Mhm.
And I think it's a great entry point for conversation when people say, well, I'm not happy, and to ask them what that means. And I think maybe another word, as I was listening to you talk about contentment and well-being, I would say peace.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like the word happy too. And I like the experience as well. I think it's a pretty natural outcome of healing. I just think that what is more, where you get more bang for your buck, is knowing how to be with all of the feelings. And part of what, I call that emotional resilience. I think the great thing is that it's really about testing ourselves and learning to trust ourselves. And once we start to have those experiences where we can recover or digest or express or just bounce back from the pain of our lives, our losses, our stresses, whatever it is, then we start to trust ourselves and we start to feel so capable and so strong that we can actually live the life that we dream of, where we can take bigger risks, we can connect more deeply, we can get out of our comfort zone, and really, I think, actualize into who we are, the best version of ourselves. And through that, it's a pretty enjoyable experience, when you start having these experiences that feel like they're blessings or miracles or synchronicities, or you're surrounded by people that bring out your best. That's going to feel really good. But I think the way there is really through earning it, through testing ourselves, through being able to be with all of the feelings versus just focusing exclusively on trying to create happy.
Agreed. Because obviously, if you don't have happiness, or you don't feel happy, or you don't know what that is, there's a lot of things in the way that you do
Right.
have that need to be let go of, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I love that.
So let's talk about your therapy for a second, both
Sure.
the methods that you use with your clients and the methods that you have experienced, and what you thought really moved the needle for you. Because I think I heard you say in your first or second show, or we've talked about that the sort of the idea of that most therapists are not doing a very good job of X, Y, and Z. And
Right.
I'm not a proponent of traditional therapy for that reason, because I see what happens with people even just with a therapist who has to gain trust with a client. So over the course of a couple sessions, will repeat back and reflect back to them to build this trust. But yet, anyway, I just feel like it's such a waste of time when that person may never come back again if you haven't gotten to an awareness.
Right.
And so I hate that process, because it wastes time, especially with people who don't want to be in therapy in the first place. It's like they're going to come in, and to me, I'm like, and that's why for me, I have haters, or I have people who don't like me in my show. In fact, I even had someone in my mastermind group who said to me, after listening to the Dear Hater show, she's like, when I first listened to you, I had a hard time. She's like, and I thought about it and I knew it wasn't you. It was very confronting, because what you said was true. And And to me, it's not necessarily the right way, quote unquote, in the therapy world to work with a client. But to me, I'm like, let's just get over the bullshit. I want people to actually want to do the work. And I don't want to spend 7 years to get you to open up to something.
Right.
I feel like I don't. So
Well, I
let's.
think we have that in common. I think that's part of what I resonated with you is that you're a real direct, straight shooter, and I am too. And that's been a journey for me. I joke that I'm nearly impalatable these days. And I tell people who call me, you know, the first thing I do when we talk about how I work is I really let them know that I'm direct and collaborative, and I'm going to expect them to do work outside of our sessions if they really want to, you know, achieve results, and that I'm not just going to sit on the couch and moan and, you know, ask them how they feel. So do you want me to start with kind of my own background in therapy, or
Yeah, I want to
a
add
little bit?
in. I want to add in a quick story. I
Sure.
had seen a therapist who did EMDR. She was on my insurance, and I think everyone's heard this story on the show before. But if you haven't, it was someone who I was looking for EMDR. I went to her, and she was very right brained. And for those of you that haven't figured it out, I'm both, and both, but I tend to use my right or my left brain more on the show, be strategic and linear and direct and all that kind of stuff. So I went to this woman and she did EMDR, but she'd always start the session with, "How are you doing?" Like in the moment. So I tell her in the moment, like how I'm doing. And
Uh-huh.
then she would just ask me questions about whatever that answer was. And so the hour goes by and
And you
there's no
didn't do
EMDR.
EMDR? Yeah.
And it happened 6 times. Now, every time I would leave her office, I would email her and say, "Hi, I'm coming to you for EMDR. I really want to do EMDR." And she's like, "Okay." And then I think I did the EMDR twice in those 6 sessions. I
Right.
wanted to do it as much as we could. And finally, at the end, she said, "Well, JJ, every time you come in, you talk about what's going on at home." I said, "Because you ask me." You
Right.
ask me, and this is your room, and I'm not going to try to tell you what to. So for me, it was learning. Like I had to go through a couple different people to find the right personality,
Yes.
to find the right set of tools. Someone who could do EMDR and hypnosis, who was a little bit more balanced brain, or at least more left brain. I
Right.
didn't need the hand-holding validation
Right.
that she wanted to give me. So I want to hear who worked for you, who didn't work for you, what moved the needle for you when you were going through therapy.
Right. Great question. And so I can totally just picture that. But that's too bad. So first of all, I would say that there's one individual therapist that really was life-changing for me. And I found her as a teenager. It was the first therapist that I saw, or not the first, but the first therapist I worked with after my boyfriend's suicide. And since then, there's really not been an individual therapist that has really been life-changing for me. I had to be in therapy for grad school when I was starting to see clients. And so I worked with a few therapists then, but they weren't quite the right fit, partly for me because as a trained therapist and just a pretty intuitive person, I can't tolerate any bit of falseness. And so the whole very audible empathic moaning, and this also is probably partially connected to my own wounding as well around receiving care, to be honest. But, you know, it's like my meter for bullshit is just so high. So, you know, there was a way that a lot of the therapists I would see would just kind of hide out in that sense of, oh, oh, you know, it's like, and I don't think that is that helpful. Um, I would say, you know, and the person that was really, I did also do a lot of couples work. I have a husband. You have an almost husband. I have a husband. So I was married, and we did a ton of work trying to salvage or make that marriage work. So I've seen all kinds of therapists, and, you know, I've trained in various modalities. There are definitely modalities that I really respect. I think as far as my overall critique on the field, it really depends on the integrity of the therapist, and I think the demand on the therapist. And what I mean by integrity is, you know, someone has to really trust that they're going to have a flow of clients where they don't have to enable a client to stay with them for money. They don't need to be so afraid of whether or not someone likes them or does not like them that they're just trying to keep the client comfortable and coming back. So if someone is either afraid they don't have enough money or that they really need to be liked, they're not going to be able to have integrity to really get people out of their comfort zone. And the other piece is being a therapist is an amazing career. And I think that a lot of people choose it for that reason. And if you haven't had the depth of pain that demands you really show up to your work relentlessly to heal yourself, you might not know how to heal someone else. You might not know actually how to take them past where you've where you've gone. And so I think there's probably a lot of very well-intentioned people that they have all the training, but they don't actually know it from the inside. And so they're limited. The person that, really tipped the scales in my own personal healing is someone who's very private. And so I talk about him throughout the shit show, but he didn't want me to use his name. And a lot of the most direct, emotional pooping methodologies actually come from my work with him. But he is someone who is more initiated into an Apache lineage. He's someone where we would talk on the phone for 2 weeks or for 2 hours every 2 weeks. And he was so intensely confronting with me and with everyone I've sent to him. I mean, I've had to become so careful sending people to him because most people can't tolerate the level of direct confrontation that he brings. And it was, for me, it took months in the beginning to really be able to sit with and speak about part of what he was showing me about me. But he basically, it's like the metaphor that we used was like, if you go to a doctor and you have a tumor, in one of your breasts, do you want the doctor to talk to you about how great your other breast is? And so what he does is he says, hey, look, you've got this tumor and this is where it comes from and this is what it's doing. This is what the havoc it's wreaking on your life. It brings up a real defensiveness in most people because the therapeutic industry is more like, oh, you have a tumor, but it's not your fault. That was the best you could do, poor baby. Like that's more the tone. And so I think, for people working with him and for people working with me at this point, because I'm already a direct person, just personality wise, and I have become really even more direct. It's helping people understand, trying to be as non-pathologizing and non-shaming as possible, but trying to say, hey, look, I want to help you with this tumor. You did as best you can. You're now paying me a lot of money to help you, do something you haven't been able to do for yourself. And the last thing I'll say is that, I try to give people a sense in the first session of what I see and what some of my ideas would be of how we would work with it in a pretty direct way so that they do have that sense. And there are a lot of clients where they're just going to over time realize, I'm too direct and they need it softer, and that's okay. Luckily there are so many therapists and there's no shortage of therapists that will moan at you. And I also want to say, I don't think all therapists suck. I think there's fantastic practitioners, tons of them, but I just think as an industry, I'd give us a B-.
I'd agree with that. And I've seen a handful of people myself and have my own critiques of things I would have preferred after the fact, things I had to learn later. And I went, well, I wish you would have said that, or I wish we would have focused on that a little bit more. Or in the case of someone that I've worked with for years who I see sporadically, although she kicked me out last time and said, you're fine, go away, don't come back.
Which is awesome, right? Like, I love that. Like a therapist actually firing the client. It's like, that's good.
No, she's like, I love you, but you don't need therapy. You're fine. Because I said, I want a double session. I want EMDR in the first half. I want hypnosis in the second half. Yeah. And I hadn't seen her in years, but she just was like, you're fine. So, but at the same time.
By the way, I think EMDR is amazingly effective. I do EMDR and
do you do it on Zoom?
I have, but it's a little more complicated. What we would need to do for that is the person would have to download an app where they can do bilateral, but I have done it and I could do it.
Okay. Important for me to know and promote that. There's only been one other person on the show who has said that they do EMDR virtually. And so it's important for me to let people know because I want to give them a resource so that they have it, because sometimes it's hard for people to find locally.
And I think it should be malpractice, honestly, for a therapist to not know EMDR, because like your question about people who have had so much trauma and they don't want to go toward it, there is something to be said for bringing up the trauma in someone's system without giving them anything that helps it. And, just every single EMDR session I've done, and I've done hundreds and hundreds of them, it's like, there's no one who is more activated after the EMDR. It's like everybody feels better, whether or not it clears the whole thing or brings them to the place they want to get to in one session is questionable, sometimes not, but everyone feels better. And I think every therapist should know it.
I agree. So let's talk about where people find you if they're interested in listening to your show or having a session.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, the first thing that I did is I streamlined a way for people to jump into the skill portion of the Healing Feeling Shit Show. And to do that, the easiest way is to go to the URL, yourcorewound.com. just like it sounds, yourcorewound.com. And I created a quiz there where you take this quiz. It takes you probably about 5, maybe 6 minutes. Just rate the statements, and then it will email me your results. I will look at every single one, and I email you a little module, a free module that will give you the emotion that I think you should start your work with. It's not exactly true to say it's the theme of your core wound, because most core wounds are organized kind of similarly, and shame and worthlessness and belonging is always going to be deeper than sadness and anger. But it's like the emotion that is out of whack in your system that will give you an access point to try some of these skills. So I send you an episode of The Shit Show, a little video of me explaining how to work with that emotion, and a list of skills. Now, you will get much, much more out of that work, that streamlined action-based work, if you also listen to The Shit Show, and that is Healing Feeling Shit. And that I in shit is an asterisk, because in the end, if iTunes tells you don't have a podcast if you swear, I said, okay. And I did what they told me. So Healing Feeling Shit Show, it's on iTunes, Spotify, and all the places you would find podcasts. And the best way to, connect with me, whether I'm going to be leading some group work as well as doing individual work, is through my website, which is healingfeelingshitshow.com. You can email me through that. My email is there. And it's just the same name, but at Gmail. So yeah, but if you want to jump in the work, if you want to get the benefit, I would say go to yourcorewound.com right away, take the quiz. I'll send you the stuff and start listening to The Shit Show. And yeah, I'm here for you. If I'm happy to have questions answered, and you can record them. And I'm also constantly looking for funny poop stories. So if you have, had the I pooped my pants accidentally kind of experience, or something else that's funny and outrageous, or if you do end up having it, next time you poop your pants accidentally, know that there is a really special place waiting for that story. So we'll take your poop stories.
Awesome. Okay. And then people will not share that, because they'll be like, I don't want to know my poop story. So you can come in, maybe they can do an alias.
Yeah. You don't even need to use your name. All you do is you record it and you email it to me. But anyway, no pressure on the poop stories. Yourcorewound.com, Healing Feeling Shit Show. And for those brave poopers, you know where to find me.
Okay. Awesome. Rachel, thank you. Everyone check out the Healing Feeling Shit Show, yourcorewound.com. And I appreciate today's conversation. I know we have similar missions. So thank you again for being on the show today.
Pleasure to connect, JJ. Thanks so much.